we're going to do a second teaching on how to study context. One of the important things about studying is asking questions when you hear things. The absolute worst thing you can do is take a teacher's word for things, because there's a lot of teachers out there who are teaching theory and calling it facts. So you need to be able to ask questions, and you have an absolute right to ask questions, and no teacher should consider themselves to be above answering them. So, okay, so you just watched a video and you were following along, and all of a sudden, bam, something just doesn't make sense. Well, what just happened? So you keep watching, hoping the teacher will explain what they just said, and no, they go on using this new and confusing piece of information as the foundation for what they are now explaining, and you're totally lost. Well, you assume you must have missed something, and so you go back and listen again, and no, he or she didn't explain it at any point during the teaching. They just dropped it there and expected you to accept it. So what do? Well, first of all, you need to ask yourself a few questions. Were you watching an advanced teaching when you're really a beginner? If so, then you probably need to take a few steps back. Taking a college course, if you belong in kindergarten, is a waste of everyone's time. The teacher's time, and more importantly, your time. But at this point, it's fair to contact the teacher and say, you said such and such and I didn't understand. Do you cover this in past teaching so that I can get a better foundation for what you're saying? Now, expect an answer, but if you never get one within a week or so, then ask again. And if there's still no answer after another week or so, then let it go and just learn from another teacher. If you are at the level where you should be able to understand and you feel the teacher made an illogical leap without justification, then you have an absolute right to ask questions. At this point, the teacher either needs to justify what they taught you, or they need to admit that they just made an assumption. Now, when teachers make an assumption or a guess, even if it's an educated guess, they really need to preface what they're saying with, I believe, or this is my best guess. But an educated guess will have some sort of firm backing to it and not simply be pulled out of thin air. Now, by firm, I mean rooted in history and context, not just sounding interesting. Now, teachers absolutely need to be responsible about the language they use in conveying whether something is opinion, an educated guess, or the truth based on hard facts. You know, there's always the risk that what once happened to me will happen to you, that your question will be met with a humiliating or dismissive response. I once asked a self-proclaimed teacher a question about something I didn't understand when I was new. And instead of giving me the very quick and concise answer of, well, we see that in Acts 10, it surprised me when I learned that too, which is the answer I always give people to that particular question. He gave me the non-answer, well, why wouldn't they still be doing that? Teaching is not about spewing information for people to swallow. It's about interacting as much as is necessary in order to bring understanding. If a teacher cannot answer a simple question without acting badly, then they are not fit to teach or assume any type of leadership position within the body. The same goes for anyone who will humiliate you for the crime of not yet having learned something. The teacher needs to be polite, but so do you. Fruit of the Spirit alert! You both need to act with loving, self-controlled humility and, above all, patience. The teacher needs to make an effort, yes, but be aware that you cannot expect any teacher to boil down a year of research into a paragraph on Facebook. You know, I have my temple studies, and my first 4 classes out of 52 fill a whole binder this thick and another one this thick. I can't boil that down to a short response. And to ask me a question and get a good answer, you need to have studied on this very complex issue at least a little bit, and not just have read one book by a theorist. Not everything Sorry, hearing things blow away here. Not everything is able to be condensed nicely, and even things that can be condensed oftentimes require a good foundational knowledge of other things first. But I still need to be polite. As long as the questioner is respectful, the teacher should at least be able to steer them in the direction of some basic teachings that will help them out. Now, you should be able to expect your teacher to share their resources. I don't mean that they mail you their books, but you should be able to know where they got their information. This isn't a secret society, and no one should be hoarding the good stuff so that they can dazzle the masses without being held accountable for the validity of their sources. Now, if you go onto my YouTube page, which you're probably already there, and access any one of the Lee Miller videos I downloaded from his site, House of David Fellowship, and I included his website in the description of each, so you can visit and support his ministry. Now you can watch, and he will share the articles he reads. He will share the sources for his word studies. He dots every I and crosses every T. Now, as soon as I saw a couple of his videos that he has provided very graciously for free on his website, I bought every video he had and studied them, and even used some of the articles he referenced in my books as sources. I have never needed to contact him to get him to explain anything, because he leaves a paper trail a mile long. You know, even when I disagree in part with something that he's saying, I can see his thought process that went into the teaching, and I can respect it. If a teacher doesn't make any sense to you, and neither do their explanations, just walk away. Don't assume that there's anything wrong with them or with yourself. Sometimes there's just a season for things, and we aren't ready yet. And sometimes a person's teaching style just doesn't work for us. Part company, find another teacher, no big deal. Asking questions in a polite way proves that you are interested in what they have to say and are wanting to be a true disciple of Yeshua. Know that sometimes answers don't come with the first contact. If someone is traveling or gets a lot of questions, they may never see yours, and so it's okay to ask again. A lot of teachers post their schedule on their websites, which will help you know how busy they are and how likely you are to get an answer. Now, don't be intimidated, and never feel like somehow they are too lofty above you to be required to justify what they're asking you to believe. This is the Bible we're talking about, and no one should have carte blanche to teach you what they want and not be questioned. As a teacher, there's only one type of question I personally refuse to answer, and those are the questions that aren't real questions. By people who have shown me time and time again that they're only asking so that they can disagree with me and school me on their version of the truth. Now, I love genuine questions that keep me sharp, accountable, honest, and it's a rush to bring the person to the place where they get it. But neither I or anyone else has time for people who are simply playing games or wanting to promote their own theories. Now, if they can prove that I'm wrong in context, that's great, and I welcome that. But they need to have legitimate sources. You know, no one has time for just hearing, well, I think this is true, or it makes sense to me, or don't you think that? Usually when someone says, don't you think that, it means they don't have anything solid. Anyway, you know, I don't do these things to people that I disagree with. I simply teach what I find in the archaeological record, and it isn't the obligation of anyone on this earth to agree with me on everything. Some people can look at the same information and come to different points of view. Usually not diametrically opposed points of view, but variational, and that's all right. Now, I hope that helps you out to know that, you know, you're a worthwhile person and your education is worth it. And if you're taking the time to listen to someone, they can take the time to answer questions if you have them. You know, in the meantime, you know, just keep learning and never be intimidated to ask questions you need answers to. It's all part of taking responsibility for your own studies. And never, ever, ever assume that any teacher is going to care more about your education than you do. Some teachers out there, I'm sad to say, are really only interested in sounding intelligent and impressing people and being believed. Not everyone is actually interested in education. There's a lot of people out there who are really interested in indoctrination, in preaching their agendas, in causing you to come into conformance with what they want to be true or what they need to be true. An awful lot of times people have invested such a lot in their brand of theology that they will go through the scriptures and they will make everything fit. You know, I once had somebody teach me that being unclean is a sin, okay? And the scriptures are very clear, being unclean is not a sin. Being unclean is just a temporary disqualification for attendance at the temple. And nowhere in scripture will you see it said that it's a sin. And so I asked them, I said, well, Yeshua, Jesus, he was unclean several times. In scripture, I mean, he was around dead bodies. That brought corpse impurity. He touched a leper, purity. He came in contact with a woman with the issue of blood, impurity. So how could Yeshua have sinned? And the man's response was, well, he was a priest. But no, that doesn't make any sense. One, wrong tribe. Judah cannot have the priesthood, and Hebrews backs this up. Yeshua could not be a priest while on earth because he was the wrong tribe. The priesthood belongs to the Levites, the sons of Aaron specifically, through Phinehas and Zadok. But he developed this theology where being unclean is this horrible thing when really it's not. And the truth be told, anyone who's been in the room with a dead body is unclean and needs to go through certain cleansing to be able to go to the temple and come before the throne, the physical throne of God. So that's an example of somebody looking through the scriptures, not paying attention to context. And when I asked them, they came up with an answer that also wasn't rooted in context. But I let it go. But I just, I made note of it, that he wasn't teaching context. He was teaching his agenda. And so it's important that we get educated. It's important that just because somebody answers our question, that we need to make sure that their answer is valid. And that goes for me or any other teacher. Don't just believe what I say, as my mentor Rico Cortez says, who is also a great teacher, and he also provides his sources. If you go through his teachings, you'll see the same thing that I told you about Lee Miller. He says, don't believe everything I say, verify everything I say. And I took him at his word, and he and I sometimes disagree on things, but I can see where he gets I can see his justification for his teaching, because again, he leaves a trail. And he's also willing to change his mind and listen to other points of view. So, any good teacher will do that. Any good teacher is teachable, because we want to learn if we're real teachers. So, next week I am going to talk about legitimate and illegitimate study aids. And yeah, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk about the common ones like Strong's Concordance, expository dictionaries, and just some of the common ones you see out there, and we're going to find out, are they even worth your money? You may be surprised. Anyway, have a wonderful day, and keep studying. You'll get there. Bye now.